This is part 5 of the Kyosho Lazer ZX6 build series. So the chassis is mostly done now. All that's really left is to build the shocks and mount the electronics. So I'm going to go over basically from the battery posts forward. So that's the battery post, the steering knuckles, rear hub carriers, turnbuckles, and sway bars, and the universal joints. So first off, a bit about the battery posts. The ZX6 kit only comes with plastic battery posts. The ZX5 FS2 SP came with really nice gunmetal aluminum posts. And I think the reason they only give you plastic posts this time is twofold. First is because there are a variety of configurations you can use, either saddle pack, which would use all 4 posts, or shorty pack, which would only use 2 posts. So if they gave you 4 aluminum posts and you ended up only using 2 of them for a shorty pack type of layout, then they're wasting 2 aluminum posts. And it costs more money to waste aluminum parts than to waste plastic parts on a parts tree. Also, the aluminum chassis costs money, and that's money that you basically can't spend on aluminum posts. So I can kind of see why they wouldn't include them, but at the same time, you know, at least for blink factor, it would have been nice, but it's not really necessary. So again, it's neither here nor there. It would have been nice, but especially considering the price of the kit, but I get it. Moving on to the turnbuckles. The turnbuckles are steel turnbuckles. They are not titanium turnbuckles. This is probably my biggest gripe. If anything, again, considering the cost of the kit, it would have been nice if they gave you titanium turnbuckles. If I remember correctly, the Losi 22.4, that actually also might have steel turnbuckles. I might be wrong, but that's a much cheaper kit. All of these turnbuckles, though, the steering links and the front and rear camber links, they're all 40mm turnbuckles. So you can get the Lunsford ZX6 titanium turnbuckle kit, which is like $42 or so, and they do come with their own ball cups with holes in them, so you could use a hex driver to, you know, screw or adjust the ball studs, but that actually doesn't make sense on this kit because these ball studs don't have the holes, the hex heads in them for you to adjust them with a hex driver. You have to actually use a nut driver, so you have to pop the ball cups off anyway. In any case, you can get the Lunsford kit, or you can just find 40mm long titanium turnbuckles. I think Yokomo makes 40mm long ones, or 42, really close in length, and they're pretty cheap. They're maybe $7 or $8 a pair, so 3 pairs is, what, $24? That's almost half as much as you would spend on the actual Lunsford kit. So you can get titanium units for not that much. As far as the front goes, let's see if I can... Okay, so the front spindle carrier assembly is very similar to the B44. You have 2 screws that screw through metal bushings, and the bushings, or the screw rotates on those bushings, and the screw terminates inside the caster block. They do give you 2 caster blocks. I forget the exact number. Let me look that up real quick. They give you a 371, yada yada. I think a 12 degree and a 7 degree caster block, and you use one of them. I forget which one. Anyway, you do have to, or it's a good idea to use some black grease on the screws here, these kingpin screws, before you thread them through the bushing. That just keeps the steering smoother. It prevents wear and therefore slop from building up too quickly between that screw and the bushing that it rotates on. They do give you a plastic washer to put down here to move the spindle carrier down. I assume that washer basically means the spindle carrier vertical position is adjustable. So you could take the washer out of here and put it on top to move the spindle carrier up and move the front down. So you can adjust your steering a little bit by adjusting the height of the spindle carrier here. That's a pretty cool feature. The universal joints are conventional CVAs. The CVA units do come fully assembled front and rear, but they are not greased. So if you want to grease them like I did, you just got to take them apart, grease them up, put them back together. It would be nice if the CVAs had C-rings around the drive pins to help clamp them in place. Team Associated does that with theirs. Some companies don't do that for some reason. It's not just Kyosho. There are other companies that don't use that C-clip. I don't know why. It really does help hold it in place in case that little set screw backs out just a tad. So it would have been nice, but you know, whatever. The wheel hexes are aluminum, so okay, some of your money's going there. I'd honestly rather it go into the C-hex. The front and rear sway bars are, they do take some time to assemble. The sway bars themselves, you have to firstly mount the ball end onto the sway bar such that the end of the ball end, if I go over here, terminates 2 millimeters ahead of the end of the sway bar. So you have to measure this out and find a way to sort of mark, maybe, you know, take a hobby knife or something and just mark a little spot 2 millimeters away from the edge here, so that way when you mount this ball end, you just line it up to that spot and you tighten it down and you're good to go. This is why when you put these two ball cups together, which is what the sway bar mounts onto here, okay, you have to cut a hole or drill a hole out of one of them so that this little protrusion here can protrude through the ball cup. I would recommend not actually drilling a hole because the speed from the drill will generate heat and that can end up melting this plastic. Not a good idea. So instead you should just take a body reamer and just, you know, ream a hole. That way the actual hole itself is much smoother and you won't have any real problems there. Let's see. So yeah, once you put the sway bar on, then you have to mount these two little cap pieces over the sway bar to hold it in place on the gearbox. And this part here, they only give you 3x6 millimeter screws to mount this cap against the gearbox. I think there's enough space for them to use a 3x8 millimeter screw to give you a little bit more threading to really tighten this down. Because if you over tighten it, you strip the thread without actually getting all the way through the opening here, the screw hole opening. And if you screw too loose, this little guy here will move around too much. So there's not a whole lot of space here for these guys. I'd recommend using a longer screw, or just when you tighten this down, be really careful not to over tighten. And when you tighten this grub screw down, this set screw, the whole idea there is for, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. The set screw is meant to pick up the slack in this gap here that the sway bar fills. So you tighten it down all the way until the sway bar locks, and then back off maybe half a turn or a full turn just to give it just enough space to move around, but not so much space that it's flopping around in this open gap here. Okay, so that's what you do, and you do the same thing for the front and rear. Okay, the rear assembly is no different. Similar kind of sway bar. Sway bar I think is a little thicker in the rear, but otherwise the same sort of assembly. And the rear hub carriers are just plastic rear hub carriers. I actually prefer to run the plastic parts instead of the aftermarket aluminum parts. If you break a plastic part, it's really relatively cheap. Sometimes what I see people do is they'll end up breaking the ball stud in the aluminum hub carrier and they can't get the thread, the screw out. So then you have to buy a whole new aluminum hub carrier, and that's just stupid. So use a plastic part and save yourself trouble. So that's basically it for this. I don't think I have anything else. Oh, right. Wheel nuts here are serrated wheel nuts. They are not serrated lock nuts. There's no locking plastic inside the nut. So if you want an actual lock nut or a serrated lock nut, you got to get a different type of nut. FYI. Anyway, so far so good. A little disappointed with the material choice on the turnbuckles and the battery post. Battery posts I can understand. The turnbuckles, I think they really should have included titanium units for a kit that's this expensive. The sway bars do take a little bit of time to assemble. Again, take your time with them, make sure you don't screw up. They only give you 2 spare small ball cups here, so if you really screw up on drilling those holes, you won't have that many left to try again. So really be careful there. Yeah, so that's it. Next step is building the shocks. Probably get to that tomorrow. It's pretty late right now. And then after that, the electronics. So until then, thanks for watching.